if I can get my panelists to take a moment to introduce themselves, that'll be great. I'll start by introducing myself. I am Sandeep Dahiya. I'm a longtime faculty member here at McDonough School of Business. I am a professor of finance. I'm also the director of the Initiative on Business of Health. And it's very appropriate that we have this healthcare career panel. So let me invite Kayla to kick it off, and followed by Stephanie, Rahul, Grace, and Neil. If you can all give a brief introduction to our audience. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you guys. Thank you for the handoff, Sandeep. My name is Kayla. I'm a recent grad, or not too recent anymore, actually, of Georgetown University, where I graduated in 2021. While there, I studied biology of global health and heavily involved with our alternative break programs, also after school kids programs, and CSP and GSP alumni as well. Nice to meet everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie. Thanks for having me. I graduated from Georgetown in 2017 with bachelor's in healthcare management and policy. And then I went and got my master's also from Georgetown in health systems administration. And that's kind of what kicked off my career at CVS, where I'm at today. And I'm based out of Arlington, Virginia.
Thank you.
Nice to meet everyone. Hey, so graduated Georgetown 2016, was in the NHS with human sciences, so pre-med, and I kind of went a different route. Instead of going to med school, moved to New York, did healthcare investment banking, spent a few years there. Then I moved to San Francisco, did healthcare venture capital. Then I went to get my MBA. I went to Penn for my MBA, and now I am chief of staff at a digital health company where I run finance and I run customer success based in New York City. So nice to meet everyone.
Who's next?
Grace?
Hi, everybody. My name is Grace Dan. I graduated Georgetown with a degree in international health in 2009. I spent a few years in public health research and then moved into healthcare management consulting, and most recently spent almost 10 years with York-Presbyterian Health System and their internal consulting group. And I got my MBA from Yale School of Management in 2022. And I now live in New Haven, Connecticut, and am just starting as a part-time engagement director for Huron Consulting Group.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Neil?
Yeah, sorry, I did not remember our order of ops. Sometimes people get up and say I feel like the oldest panelist, but I in fact definitely am the oldest panelist up here. Graduated to 22, maybe 23 years ago. Started outside of healthcare, American Express, went to business school, graduated in 2002, went into consulting, started picking up healthcare clients, Kaiser Permanente, other folks like the work, and then just kind of doubled down in that space, about a decade in consulting at Deloitte and Chartis Group. Then I went to help be a healthcare chief strategy officer and run a bunch of stuff at a health system. Left that to do digital startup work and venture capital work, which is what I do now. So I've really kind of worked a lot across the payer provider landscape over the last 20, 25 years.
Actually, Neil, that's great, because this is sort of the direction that I wanted to take, which is invite our panelists to share a little bit of the journey that they have undertaken since graduating. Some of our panelists are recent grads, some graduated a while ago, but it'll be wonderful for our audience to understand these different journeys that you have each undertaken. So, Kayla, you are probably closest in age to probably the audience we have, because I think you are the most recent grad. So
I am, yes.
go ahead.
Yes, so post-graduating at Georgetown, I was interning and working with the CDC for the summer. So I was helping them create short-term experiential limits using my stat minor to do regression analyses and see how we can protect Americans from chemicals. From there, I realized that while I love working with statistics, I kind of miss that client customer facing work. where I was working mainly on my own in a silo and not really with a team. So from there, I started working for the government for about a year, helping them reimburse hospitals for COVID relief items. During COVID, a lot of hospitals were pivoting to buying remote healthcare items to help their patients. A lot of times, it took a lot of the budget from them. So having these grants really helped them be able to help their patients and afford really quality of life care for these people. While the work was great, it got kind of monotonous. I was doing the same thing almost every day, looking at grants, reviewing and rejecting them, and no one likes to get rejected. I learned getting those emails and even calls. It was a lot of work, but it was very rewarding. And from there, I realized that I wanted to pursue my passions that were more so involved with kind of pivot from the government. I found Veeva, where I am now a business consultant, and I love my role. I work with various customers, whether it be a top 10 or a smaller SMB, create a drug and launch it. So it really shows a different pathway and how it kind of takes some time, because I was pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor initially, and now I'm working in pharma and business and helping, customers launch a drug or get their stuff to market faster.
Thank you very much, and thank you for plugging Jody. Yeah, for the audience, make sure that you stay in touch with the career office, and it's a lifelong capital that you should leverage. Great, Stephanie.
I will also do a plug for the career office / career center, because that really helped start my journey into the workforce. So like I mentioned before, I graduated in 2017. But as you know, with Georgetown, it's very competitive. So looking for jobs was tough for me. I didn't know where I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to do healthcare. But the career, and I also knew I wanted to get a master's degree, but didn't know in what. And so the Career Center really helped me, open the opportunity of like, well, you can work for Georgetown and also get your master's degree at the same time if you wanted to. And so I applied to work at the development Office of Advancement, and that's where I started off full time working for biomedical research. So that's what we were fundraising for. And also that pavilion that you guys have now at MedStar, those fundraising efforts started in 2017. So I was there kind of for that launch, and I got my master's from 2018 to 2020 in health systems administration. So I worked full time and I went to school part-time, which was also a great perk of being at Georgetown. Being able to have a paycheck to sustain me and also focus on my passions in healthcare. And then after that, I went into consulting for a small firm called Eagle Hill over in Crystal City, and with your project sometimes. So although I advocated for healthcare, I was put in a customs and border protection project working for a tech transformation project. And that opened my eyes into tech and the digital world. I really learned how to work with software engineers, learned about AI, launching change management projects. And so I was like, what can I do with this and also keep my passion for healthcare, which is helping people? And so I became intentional with my job search and was looking at specific healthcare companies and also, where I can do work in technology. And that's how I landed at CVS, where I am today. I started out in digital marketing and then transitioned over to being a product owner. And right now I'm a product manager for a program or a product called Accordant. And what we do is we help people manage their complex conditions. So we bridge the gap of the expensive care that you're getting from going to your hospital to the care that you might be missing at home. So we provide digital products like mobile applications, and we provide them with nurses and things of that nature that can help them. So yeah.
It's very interesting, Stephanie, that the program that you're mentioning, because I keep hearing about compliance or adherence, where the challenge is not diagnosis, challenge is not prescription, challenge is to getting patients to actually adhere to the regimen that they have been prescribed. Thank you so much, Rahul.
Sure. Yeah. So I think like a lot of people on this call, I'm reading the chats. I was pre-med at Georgetown. So by the end of my sophomore year, I had finished all my pre-med requirements. I spent a summer doing orgo, which was not fun, but it was at Georgetown. And then I took a step back and I really reevaluated, hey, do I want to be a doctor? Right. And fortunate for me, I had a brother who actually was MSB class of 2013, or no, 2013. And he was doing investment banking at the time. And he said, hey, sir, you should learn about the business of healthcare, right? Healthcare is great. You can become a doctor, but understand health plan, understanding how the whole healthcare system works would be very good for your career, right? So I was fortunate where I kind of milked off being an NHS student. I milked off all the hard work that the MSP Career Center does, and all the investment bankers came. I studied for an opportunity, and I was able to get an internship with one of them. And I spent a summer doing that, which turned into a full-time job offer. And so I spent 2 years in New York focusing on that. And then I moved out to California to understand how to become an investor in healthcare. So I did a lot of the VC work, I did a lot of the private equity work as well. And again, it's my passion for healthcare. So I invested in everything from biotech drugs to digital health companies, right? And having the background in healthcare, understanding, I remember I was looking at a drug and I thought about a class I took at Georgetown, like a biochem class, because you put together the dots. And I think that is something which is awesome, having a background in healthcare and going into the business. You're able to connect a lot of the dots from your education to the business. And then I kind of went into more of a startup entrepreneurship role right now, where I look at M&A opportunities for a healthcare company, which helps health plans and health systems and value-based care, right? So it's actually a family-run business. So my dad is a CEO, my mom is a COO, and after business school, I joined them. So it's more entrepreneurship, and now I'm taking everything I learned in healthcare and helping scale that company. Yeah.
Fantastic, Raul. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's also like I'm seeing this recurring pattern of pre-meds. So, so if there are any pre-meds on this call, there is life beyond just pursuing physician career path in the business of healthcare. Grace, would you?
Sure, thanks, Sandeep. I can jump on the pre-med bandwagon too. I was a science student, public health student in undergrad, took a lot of pre-med courses, and then sort of started to veer towards research and did a senior thesis abroad in Ghana. I'm not sure what the structure of the international health or global health program is now, but that was one of my best experiences at Georgetown. And I got to do my own research, and that really led me to job opportunities in public health research. And despite graduating in a tough economy, so if anyone can relate to that, there are still jobs out there in a tough economy. So if that's ever you, have hope. But I was able to get a position in New York with a nonprofit, and they were really trying to build their international research arm and do some studies with foreign militaries on health risk behavior. So I worked with a really a new but very interesting and passionate PhD to help build that research and evaluation program, and got to do a lot of cool travel in Latin America and Caribbean, and some really interesting research projects. I loved doing that for 2 years, and it came to a decision point where I had to think about, do I want to get my PhD and become really focused in an area of public health research? Do I want to go and pursue med school or some sort of clinical role? Or do I want to do something entirely different because I'm in my early 20s and I have all this time to figure out what I want to do, really? And I spent a lot of time in that first job helping coordinate the business side of our research. So grants and how we made sure that we were organized in a way where we could keep our funding, how we were structured, and how our work could help programming. So I decided to focus on that and look for jobs that might be more business oriented, I guess I'll say. And through Georgetown Connection, a friend reached out. He had just started a consulting firm. They were hiring. He said, I think you'd be a great fit. And so I explored that and ended up going into consulting. I thought I was going into clinical operations consulting. They needed people on the revenue cycle side for hospital systems. So I ended up working on the revenue cycle side, which was of helping patients. So I did revenue cycle consulting and then clinical operations consulting, and really liked more of that clinical operations side. That led me to a role with York-Presbyterian, and I worked on their in-house clinical team. Funny enough, we kept getting pushed back towards financial initiatives. So when I left that job recently, I felt like the last couple of years I was very focused on recovery after COVID, financial recovery, process improvement, lots of staffing, figuring out how do we staff, especially with nursing shortages. It was every day I was learning something new. I learned a ton about how hospitals work and how they kind of fit into the larger health system. And, with the connections to medical device and pharmaceutical and technology and insurers and government. So that was a really great role. I left that job because I relocated to New Haven, Connecticut. So I know lots of you are early in your career. You never know what's coming decade plus later. So I had my first child, and my husband and I, for professional and personal reasons, relocated out of New York City. And so I am now working with Huron again. That was my former employer in a flexible role while I look for full-time opportunities in New Haven. So that was me in a nutshell, and kind of how my path developed. But I guess the takeaways from that are some of it's life circumstances. Some of it is trying to figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. Some of it is just curiosity and exploring. And some of it is opportunities that sounded interesting, and kind of just taking those on as they came.
Oh, thank you so much, Grace. It's really great to hear the exploration that you did, and also my conversations with hospital management. One of the things that was very surprising was how little overlap there was between business school and hospital management. And so it's remarkable to hear that you actually weren't one of those MHAs, Master in Health Administration, because that seems to be the dominant way how hospital administration seems to be running, rather than straight up
And I went back for my MBA because I realized I didn't have formal accounting or finance training, and I was doing so much of that. I was so close to that I said, I'd really like to get the fundamentals behind this. And that's why I chose MBA as a master's degree. So I'll wrap up there.
Neil?
Yeah, by the way, Grace, if you are back at New York Pres, trust me, they're about to get the hammer dropped on them with the Trump budget cuts to Medicaid, 340B, and site neutral payments. So I think that building may literally be on fire pretty soon. And Dr. Oz still has a grudge, apparently, against them as well, specifically. So sorry, that's a little insider baseball. So I think let me just pull back. Since I've been around for like a couple decades here, I'm not gonna like puke up my life story, but let me offer some frameworks as an old strategy guy for people to think about. So healthcare is like not one industry. I mean, it's 20% of GDP. It's kind of enormous. It's like, so think about it. I would start creating some like taxonomies to help you focus, right? So one taxonomy is sort of a nonprofit track, and that both has like international research and outreach and like public health elements to it, as well as government kind of consulting, VA, military healthcare system, all this other stuff. And then there's, payers, which is insurance companies, providers, pharma, and med devices. And believe it or not, while a lot of people on the panel have sort of moved around in the beginning part of their career, once you've been in somewhere for a couple of years, most of the people don't ever leave. So if you walk around a hospital and find 100 administrators, two of them or five of them or seven of them, especially outside of places like New York, have ever worked in medical devices or insurance companies. They grew up in one industry subsector and spent their 25 years there. So one of the important things to keep in mind is while in other industries it's a little bit more there's more permutations and permeability. Healthcare, man, people get in very rigid silos pretty quickly and people get sort of branded in places. For one subsector like the investment VC side, that one of the other panels that Raul talked about, I do a lot of work in very city specific. So in other words, 80% of the healthcare VC people are in three cities. They're in Nashville in private equity. They're in Nashville, they're in New York, and they're in San Francisco. They're smattering other places like Chicago, DC, whatever. But like, if you want to work in one of those three industries, if you want to work in that subsector, you probably want to need to live in one of those three cities, right? And I'll also say that the average age of the people running around at the VC shops, the private equity shops, is like 29. There's like 60% of the staff are like right out of B school, and then a few people who are kind of older, sorry, recovering from a cold, who generally have a lot of connections to people who they can raise money from. So while there may seem like an endless possibility of sort of floating around, there are entire subsectors where like 80% of the staffing is done by the time you're 5 years out of undergrad or 3 years out of business school. So just keep in mind some things are like longer track. And then I just want to get to the professor's points and Deep's point about hospitals and MHAs. A lot of healthcare moves on a very slow career trajectory. So a lot of hospital administrators take 25 years to move up 3 levels in the org, right? Because there's only like 5 levels, even though you might have 10,000 people working in a hospital. And so that's why I think the MBA crowd can get a little frustrated around income and permeability. And you're like, and I had this frustration, like, why would I go to business school, have this high-flying career, and then want to stay in a specific job for 5 to 10 years? But that's actually what most people in the insurance companies do. That's what most people in the payer land do. And I can't speak to pharma and med devices, but it is a much more slower track than some other possibilities. So open to talking more about this stuff. People can reach me on LinkedIn, but I think it's really important to think about like what's your velocity expectations? What kind of city do you want to live in? Who do you want to meet and who do you want to work with? And work backwards from there. And then one last note for the pre-meds. Um, if I had $1 for every middle-aged doctor who got bored seeing patients in a clinic who wanted to do something more like what I'm doing, I'd be a rich man. So just keep in mind, healthcare is one of those things that tends to like pick really smart people onto a clinical track. They really love it for the first 10 years, and then their job is about 98% the same as it was 10 years ago, and they get really bored. And they're also being managed by people who had like 200 less points on their SATs, who are the hospital administrators. And also it's kind of a point of frustration and not undeservingly. So I just want to sort of play out some of the real things that you see when people are 40 and 50 and not just when they're 28.
Neil, can I ask a quick question to add on to that real quick?
Yeah, sorry.
Uh,
I threw that, a lot out there. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, you talked about like payers, providers, med device. How do you think digital health and like the sort of new wave of health tech fits into that?
I would say digital health is a little bit more permeable, but I don't see a lot of digital health companies that are successful, at least unless they're a huge scale, and not an individual level, who's like, oh, I met with Pfizer one day and I met with New York-Presbyterian the next day. Because the social networks and the connectivity you need are often really deep and much more segmented. So I think even digital health, like there is a lot of like tech companies who basically serve pharma and they do a good job of serving pharma. So I think in general, while there are some exceptions, Amazon serves everyone, but it's AWS, it's a server, right? Like the more complicated stuff still tends to fall in those pipes, not always, but as a general principle, that would be my answer.
Well, thank you, Neil, and thank you for underscoring this extremely siloed nature. And it's something that is easy to miss. But even broad career categories like investment banking and consulting, from what I hear, you tend to become not a healthcare consultant. You become a hospital consultant. Like
Exactly.
even in a pure healthcare consulting
Correct.
firm,
Yep.
you as an individual would get staffed repeatedly on, say, healthcare practices. You would never get staffed on, I don't know, maybe like medical devices strategy or something.
Yeah. So can I just tell? I have to admit, at this point in my career, I'm like 80% idealistic and 20% super cynical. So let me just give one example to that, just to underscore the point. 10 years ago, 14 years ago, I rolled in from Chartist Group to a major academic medical facility. I just spent time in the VA and military healthcare system working with primary care healthcare members, thinking I'd done all this cool work about primary care and behavioral health, and it wasn't as sexy back then. And I talked to this academic group about that, and they kind of rolled their eyes. Like, there ain't anything research grants on that for me, right? Like, I'm a neuroscientist. Like, military members can go kill themselves or not. Like, that's sad, but it's not like something I really like overlaps with my passions and puts my career forward. So within these subsectors, there's a lot of like very, very, very narrow self-interest that's around branding and sort of future success. And one can just never be like as siloed as you think people are, they're almost always even more siloed than that.
Oh, thank you. Let me go to Jody and just ask because I have not kept up on the chat. Are there any questions that we need to bring up?
Questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anybody feel free to add to the chat while we're speaking and we'll get to those. But you can continue on with the next question.
No, sounds great. So what I would love to hear from you, you guys have described your journey and your current roles. In your current roles, what skills do you think are the most important? And if you can give us a little primer on how to acquire those skills, that'll be great too. Kayla, we'll kick off with you again, same order.
Yes, great. So I am a business consultant at Veeva Systems, as mentioned previously. And a lot of what my role looks like is helping pharmaceutical companies either launch their drug, optimize their marketing materials for review and approval so that it's compliant by the FDA. So when you see commercials like probably like Dupixent on your screens for even a Hulu ad, all those materials, so the text, the images, the script that you all see has to all be reviewed and approved in a system and then be sent to the FDA to make sure everything is compliant. Because of course you don't want to get sued, which you could have seen actually a few years ago when Khloe Kardashian was speaking about one of those new drugs. I forgot which one it was, but she actually went off script and the company was given a very hefty fine. And that's actually very typical in the pharmaceutical industry where you have all these materials, your brochures, commercials. Yes, thank you. It was Nerd Tech. Thank you, Violet. And all those materials have to be compliant, especially because the US is all about D2C, direct to consumer. So I would say for my specific role, as a lot of them mentioned, it can be very broad, but also very niche in an area. But I will say because I'm consulting more in the tech space where Veeva has its own platform and software, a lot of my work is different day to day with different customers. So it can be either helping them get things reviewed and approved, or it can be showing them, okay, you have these HCPs you want to target, these doctors right here. Here's the best way to make sure you get the most scripts from them. Or you have these doctors, what are their HCP segments? Are they trialists? Are they ones who care about more about the patient, or do they want more graphics in their materials and in their emails? So to answer the question that Cindy asked, the main skills required for this is to one, be flexible. All of these times, customers are coming to you as a consultant because they have a problem that they want you to fix. So it's really important that you can, one, hear them and be able to initiate on that problem, not just giving them a solution, but also being a partner through all of that and showing them, okay, here's the root cause and here's how we can walk through it together. Because oftentimes it's not that simple. And it also requires you to know the stakeholders quite well. So having that ability to know your clients and also see their problems, but also know that it's not just about the clients, it's also about the company itself and those who work there. But a lot of times what I've seen is that, you're new to consulting, you get these great recommendations that you give to say another company, and you just want to do a simple lift and shift. But it's important to always recognize the nuances in companies and your customers, and also be aware of who you want to benefit from these solutions and recommendations. And of course, the last skill I would say to have is to just be aware of the industries happening in pharmaceuticals. While being a consultant, you don't have to know the ins and outs of pharma and like how this drug works or what its mechanism of action or who are the typical patients. But it's really good to be aware of who's buying who. Like we see J&J doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Who are they buying? Sanofi, et cetera, because that plays a part in what your job as a consultant, knowing, okay, my big customer bought these 3 new ones. They kind of want to go into the, say, rare disease sector or maybe vision or eye care. It's really important for me to now get well well-versed in this, so I can write a proposal and sell some work in that area. So it takes initiative and being proactive as well to succeed in my role, I would say.
Thank you, Kayla.
Of course.
Stephanie, how about your role at CVS?
Yeah, thanks, Kayla, for sharing that. So for management and product development can mean a lot of different things from company to company. So you can be like a technical product manager, or you could be more on the business side. So you're focusing more on strategy, the value prop, what's the ROI for the products that your company is building. And I'm a little bit of both. So in my role, I think what helps me and what you need to kind of have to know to be successful is really a lot of stakeholder engagement. I'm working with sales, legal, IT. Also, CVS is a big company. We're a payer, we're a PBM, we're everything. We span every single thing in the healthcare business. So while you can be really good at one specific thing and have a lot of knowledge, what I have to focus on is understanding bits and pieces of everything. From a legal side, what do we have to deal with CMS? Is our product adhering to those regulations? If we're not meeting those regulations, it's not a good thing. You can get fined, things of that nature. And then from a technical perspective, it's pretty hard to get into product if you're not already like a computer science major or MBA. Those are typically the people they look for. So I had to be proactive and get certain certifications or just make the effort to enhance myself. So I got like a product management certification. Even to this day, I'm learning, SQL. So if you already know how to code, great, that'll set you up for success. I think it's continuously improving in these areas that product development needs and wants in the industry, and then just adapting to change. It's constantly changing, it's constantly shifting. You have to meet business goals. Like ROI is very important for a company at CVS, but you also have to meet the consumer needs. We're dealing with people, patients, that's healthcare. So it's managing to balance how can you help a patient, but also bring in that revenue for the company, which is sometimes not enjoyable when you're just thinking about revenue, but you got to know the numbers in this business.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And I appreciate you calling out the computer skill part. Healthcare is a huge data-driven industry. It's, you have data at the level of encounters, and or at least that's the promise, is that this data is yet to be used in the most effective way and is the holy grail. But
yes, data.
but thank you
And I
for
think that's
sharing.
actually, if I can jump in here for a second,
Sure, Neil.
I think that's a great taxonomy to be thinking about, because I think, as I think about this, like sort of payer provider, sort of across a bunch of the places, at least I've touched over the last 20 years, you kind of better have a strength either technically or relationship wise. So in other words, either you're a good networker and you're really good at like sales and really good at getting people on board, and like your ability is to move people, or your ability is like to help build something in a technical sense. I was surprised, I'll be kind of frank, coming from other industries where I did some strategy work in the Middle East and I did some big strategy work in other areas, how little sort of pure strategy or whatever you're often doing. And you're like, even at a pretty senior level, you're often either building stuff or selling stuff, right? And the strategy thing is often like limited to a few people, or it's sort of set. And I've done a lot of strategy work, but I've taken a lot of hits to try to retain or to get to keep doing strategy work and not just sort of funnel into either of those two buckets quickly. So I kind of keep that in mind, like which of those buckets. And if you want to be clinical, I'd sort of put the clinical in the tech bucket a little bit. It's just a different version of some similar skill sets. But I would be making sure you know how to do one of those two things, and they influence like who you're around and what you're going to be like and what your real sort of key performance measures are.
Thank you for sharing that, Neil. Rahul, it's very interesting that you are involved in entrepreneurial venture. So I teach healthcare entrepreneurship and venture capital as well. So it will be very curious to hear about what skill sets matter most to you, and if something is surprising or unusual.
Oh, sorry, Rahul, do you want to take that? Then I can jump in.
Is that Neil, or who did you
Rahul.
talk to Neil? Or
yeah, Rahul. I'm going in the same order that we had. So
okay, yeah.
Go ahead, Rahul.
So yeah, I mean, first things first. I think coming from a healthcare background, I would not be intimidated by the idea of going into business or going into consulting or going into finance, right? I know I remember myself in college, I would spend for finance. You can learn those terms quickly. So I would not be intimidated that, oh, these kids went to SFS or MSB, so they have a leg up. No, I would work hard to get an internship in banking and your healthcare knowledge to kind of propel your way into an internship, right? So I'll start saying there. To your question, Sandeep, and to Neil's point, the 20s are really how I view it as just head down grinding. So whether that's consulting, whether that's banking, whether that's grad school, just putting your head down, understanding technical skills, and maybe this is a very financy way of thinking about life, and then understanding how the whole ecosystem works, right? There's a reason why health plans are acting the way because of government influence, because of pharma prices. That leads to health systems acting in a different way. That leads to healthcare IT companies finding innovative solutions to try to help those payers and health systems, right? So it's always strategically thinking about how does the whole system, yes, it's a very pointed healthcare companies, right? You have pharma companies, you have health plan companies, but at the end of the day, they all work together, and just connecting those dots and thinking strategically as an investor, okay, now that I have this background in healthcare, where's the puck going, right? Where if Medicaid enrollment is going down, how are people going to react to that, right? So you need to have that lens as an investor, and just putting together your skill on healthcare and understanding how it works to think about where to invest in next or where to look into next, right?
So,
Thank you. Grace, do you want to share what skill sets you found particularly
Sure, yeah.
helpful?
Absolutely. What everyone is saying is so true. So I've heard themes of listening, responding to customer problems and needs, being adaptable, staying curious, right? You never stop learning. You always, and as I think Rahul was speaking to this, things are always changing. So you don't, part of your career, you have to, I think that's been so helpful for me, to be able to pivot and be adaptable, is to always be curious about what kind of the big problems are, what direction the industry is going in. And that can change really quickly sometimes, especially depending on the way the political winds are shifting, as Neil mentioned before. I think one thing that, as I've gotten more advanced in my career and taken on more leadership roles, one thing that I've had to work really hard on developing as a skill is decision making. So in my early career, I might have been following the lead of senior people on my team and making decisions along the way, but now really being in charge of those decisions, and it could change the whole direction of your project or the outcome that you have. So that's something that has been really helpful for me to figure out how to do better and better, is decision making and delegating as you maybe have ownership or leadership over a team, and making thoughtful decisions and making sure you can be inclusive in how you make those decisions with your team, and that they're really actually made effectively and efficiently. So I'll say that.
Thank you. And it's very nice to hear the long-term view as well, like how early on, as Rahul as well as Stephanie mentioned, that you really need to get down, and Neil stressed it, that you really need to acquire some deep spike on something, but eventually, as Grace, you pointed out, you are making big decisions. So acquiring this skill set, did you have to acquire it more? Did it happen accidentally, or did you actually do something about it?
Some of it is organic, and it happens naturally as you take on more leadership roles, if that's something you're interested in doing in your career. And some of it comes, people ask you, hey, I want you to be the main decision maker on this, or what direction should we go? And they start asking for your opinion, especially if you're not working off of a very specific playbook, right? Sometimes as a consultant, you go in, you're doing this implementation, this is you're putting in a technical solution, or but then sometimes it's more open-ended where you have to start, making those decisions without a playbook, and building that for yourself. And some of it was like really deliberate development that I did with my mentors and my leadership teams to say, I want to get better at making decisions. I see you making them in a way that is really thoughtful, and I want to get there. So can you work with me to do that? So I think some of it's organic and some of it's really deliberate.
No, thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Neil, what about your view on skill set?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I'll just kind of focus where some other folks we haven't spent as much other time on the VC and the startup side. For the VC side, it's interesting. Like if you look at the Forbes 30 under 30, and I just noticed this because I happen to know a lot of the people on Forbes 30 under 30 in healthcare, they're almost all VCs and they're almost all like sort of financy driven. But like they're super strong in finance, they do know healthcare, they do know other stuff, but they are really like quant deal powerhouses who work really, really freaking hard. Right. And so that's sort of a note. And they're all like, obviously it's 30 under 30, but like, that sort of reflects their demographic. Right. On the founder side, I would say on the founder side, it is a very complex environment when you're a young founder. First of all, it's easier to be a young founder than old founder. Like investors really have like demographics is destiny. Like investors as a general principle, and Raul is probably more thoughtful than this. Investors as a general principle really have a lot of sort of stereotypes, honestly, in mind and tend to like follow that while making investment decisions. Like, are you like this or like that for a whole variety of reasons? And so, what I would say in terms of skill sets is super important, um, particularly for female founders. It can be a very Wild Westy environment, not unlike LA. So for like Hollywood. So it's a little different vibe versus being in a payer or provider organization. So I think finance is a big deal on the VC side. I think the founders have to tell great stories, have to be super compelling individuals, and like managing very weird, complex social environments is a key element of that. And I think you can still spike on the technical side, or spike on the shareholder side. But I think there's a lot of framing that goes on that influences that. So the market around being funded, my surprise, having been kind of a administrator for a long time, is not as rational as I thought it would be. It's more of a, do you look the right part kind of element of it that's really surprising.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Jody, I want to make sure that we have some time for Q&A. I know we have a hard deadline at 1:30. What would be your advice? Should we open up the floor? Well, I would love to ask a couple of more questions, but I would rather have audience get a say as well. Um, how do we feel about that?
Yeah, I would say if anybody has a question, you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat. We have had a question asking about, if doctors, like if I do get bored as a doctor, what can I transition into? And a lot of the panelists or a couple of the panelists have shared their thoughts on that, where there's definitely a lot of options for that, whether that's an R&D or some kind of business role or an executive role. So I think that's questions pretty well answered, but if anybody wants to add to that, yes, feel free, Neil. And then if we don't get any questions after that, Sandeep, feel free to ask one of yours.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to give a pause and just give the audience a chance. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I just want to respond to that. I want to push back just a bit. I actually think there aren't as many options as people want. I think supply and demand don't meet in that area, and I think a lot of docs are sort of well compensated, but kind of trapped in like direct clinical roles. And that's okay. Like it's still good work. It still makes people's lives better. It's still a really good living. But I think there is a group of folks who do get kind of frustrated and bored. Um, and I think that's just the reality of the situation. And so I think it's pivoting or having options later requires a lot of forethought, because actually hospital administrators are generally not as paid as well as physicians, and people are very deferential to physicians who are in clinical roles, and people are generally not pretty deferential to hospital administrators. And so the way you get treated and you're like socially and culturally because as administrator, people feel free to just yell at you. And as doctors, people are generally pretty deferential to you on the floor. And so it's a hard pivot.
I'll push back on that a little bit, Neil. And I just did answer in the chat. I think there's more and more. I mean, in the hospitals I've worked for, almost all of our leadership positions at the top level are physicians or providers, nurses. You don't just have to be a physician, you can be a provider, advanced practice provider. And I had a lot of classmates in my MBA program that were physicians. Again, you don't have to return to school to take on administrative work, but they were returning to school to get some of that acumen to take on those roles because they were being asked to. Because I do think that hospital administrators who have a clinical background are the unicorn of what people want to run the hospitals. So it doesn't get too far away from the mission of taking care of patients. So I don't think you weren't saying that, Neil, but I do think that there is more and more of a space for that merge and those opportunities for clinicians to take on those admin roles.
No, I think people want it. I think the question is like supply versus demand, and then academic medical centers versus community hospitals, where I think the academics are more preferential in the MDs. Like I had a for-profit, yeah. I mean, it just depends on the vibe.
That's probably true.
Yeah, no, it's I just wanted to share a story. I was for the School of Health grads or current students, Professor Ruyung Sir, who's a professor there. He's like a triple Hoya and was a surgeon, worked for the U.S. military as well. And that's exactly what well, I was talking to him, like what made him become a professor and do all the other exciting things he said. And that's exactly what he said, Neil. He said, I just got bored.
Totally.
It was the same surgery every day. So anyway, again, if there's any pressing question, Jody, we'll take that. Otherwise, I would love to, start the another round of questions. Is
There
there?
is a question, Sandeep. So this person says, I'm curious about financial literacy, about healthcare at undergraduate level. Based on your experiences, what do you wish you would have learned in college that would have been helpful later in your career? So what do you wish that you would have learned in college that you now know now and you wish you would have learned it earlier?
Happy to jump in.
Yeah.
So I mean, financial literacy and trying to understand what the meaning is there. But I think one thing I would urge everyone who is an undergrad here to do is take different classes that you're just interested in, right? I know when I was in college, I took a computer science. I did not do well in it, but I took a computer science class. I took accounting, financial accounting, 8:30 a.m. I remember I needed to make the hike to MSP on Monday and Wednesday. So just learning, and everyone is so fortunate to go to a school as great as Georgetown, where each of the schools are so prestigious and well in educating in their respective field. I took an IR class, which has nothing to do with anything. So I think for financial literacy, I'm not sure what that means, but if there are skills you want to learn and I would say go take a class and learn them at Georgetown. Go talk to the deans of their respective schools and say, hey, I want to learn these skills. That's really it. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's what I would do.
I actually agree with you, Rahul, because it wasn't until my senior year with the busy pre-med schedule I was able to actually take classes that interested me outside of my core requirements. And that's able to take a personal finance class. I loved it a lot. I realized I love learning about it because one, it affects not only my own life, but also if I want to be working in the industry, I should at least know the basics of finance. And I also would want to stress that beyond just taking courses, try and find internships in your area that of interest. Because a lot of the time you'll know whether or not you like the job or not. I feel as a pre-medi, we just are told, okay, shadow a doctor, do some research, and like that's really it. But in reality, take the time to also explore other ventures. That's how you know for sure what you want to do. It wasn't until I did an APB program, so alternative break through Georgetown to India, that I realized I love actually working on the other side of healthcare, not just treating people to prevent disease, but having solutions in place to actually prevent them from even getting sick in the first place. So definitely use your network, talk to professors, even those who are working in your area. Luckily in DC, there are so many professionals who are working in VC opinion to try to just get some experience where you can on top of your coursework if possible.
Wonderful. Eh, it's actually a great time to put this to our panelists because the theme is evolving towards it anyway. So if you had to give advice to our current students who are interested in intersection of business and healthcare, they want to pursue something that combines these two. What advice would you give? And I'll mix up the order this time and start with Neil and go all the way to Kayla. Like we'll work backwards. Neil, do you want a moment to think about it, or
I think it depends. It really depends on what you want to do. I think that's the real challenge to like the one thing. What I would say is it's a great time. It's a great time to be an entrepreneur to the people on this call. Like it's a lot easier to start a company before you have private school tuition to pay and like Georgetown and other things, right? Um, and particularly when you have ability to move to the right city, networks really matter. For those of you who are familiar with Michael Porter's work about the competitive nature of cities and countries and how all that stuff works, sometimes if you're going to do something, it really helps. If you're going to be in finance, New York is the best place to be on average, or London, right? If you're being a doctor, people need healthcare everywhere, right? Like whether it's Florida or somewhere else. So I think now is a great time to be an entrepreneur. I would say VC, if you can get in the door, super hard, opens a ton of a ton of doors eventually. Forbes 30 and 30, I don't think there's a single doc on there, but there are three venture capitalists on there, right? In healthcare, right? Like it's just an easier place to accelerate real fast. It's just hyper competitive, and you better be singularly focused on knocking it out. And I also think now is a great time for people to meet people. I'm just giving some just general quick advice at this stage. Like people are not going to be like, "Who are you? Go away." When you're like young, just coming out of school or coming out of graduate school, the walls go up as you get older about like, "Who are you and why are you calling me?" And like, nice. And so it's a great
Okay.
time to get out. That would be my quick off the cuff 60
thank
second.
you, Grace?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Neil said, and um, I I think that think about what your core motivations are. What do you really love to do? You may not always love your job, but there are elements that will excite you about it. And also along the way, like some practical needs come into play. You may live in an expensive city and need to pay your rent, and that may impact a job you take. And don't worry too much about those decisions if you like what you're doing and you feel motivated and excited by the work. And then if you don't, then it's okay to do something else, or for your priorities to shift. So you don't have to decide at a young age what you're going to do for the rest of your life. If you want to, that's also okay. I've seen people who've been in the same company and in the kind of the same field, or yeah, they wanted to be a doctor, they went and did it, and they're still doing it today, and they love it. So I think just be open to exploring in your early career and kind of be deliberate about what you want to do and about what motivates you, but also don't worry too much if you don't know what that is yet, or if you find it change along the way. And one more thing, keep those bridges really strong. I was telling Trudy the same connection. I've used Georgetown connections. I've gone back to other companies I worked for. So just reach out to people. People want to be helpful usually, and keep the connection strong along the way, and you'll find yourself helping people out later on like they helped you.
Grace, I'll add to that. If I can tell the audience, you guys have no idea how happy your professors are when they run into you later on. It's one of the joys of being director of this initiative. As I've gone to these events, to see my old students and to talk to them and see them thriving, it's the most wonderful feeling. So do not hesitate to stay in touch with your professors. They love it. Yeah, yeah. It's I don't know how much we can help, but we love hearing from you. Rahul?
I think one thing I would give advice to current students is just technology, right? I think you are a younger generation. I wish I was I was 2016, so I was kind of the middle of, wow, this technology can really increase efficiency, and but it's still early in the days. I'm actually at a health system right now, and we just had a meeting, and AI, I know AI, everyone says AI all the time, but it is, whether it's real AI or it's just right now, a lot of it is just rules based and everyone's calling it AI. But that is like the buzzword that everyone's looking at, like AI in healthcare, right? How do you lower costs, increase quality in healthcare? And frankly, I feel somewhat handicapped not having a big background in tech, and I can dance enough around it to be dangerous. But really, if I was young, I would take classes on it and understand how that affects healthcare moving forward. Because whether it's in drug discovery or commercialization or health systems and health plans, it's going to be it's going to be under the magnifying glass in the next few years. So that's one advice I would give to you. But I agree with Grace and Neil, networking, working hard, following your passions. It's okay to not know what you want to do. So all of that as well. But that's one thing I would just say to focus in on as well.
Thank you, Raul. Stephanie?
Yeah, I agree with Raul on that because I'm as in product development, it's all you hear. I was lucky enough to get exposure to AI and learn on the job. But if you can learn before you get on the job so you can speak to it in interviews, that's also a really good thing. For intersection of healthcare and business specifically, it's understanding how can we benefit, how can we help people, and how can we help the business. So if you can speak to both aspects, that really puts a smile on a CEO's face or the director that's hiring you, like, oh, this person gets it. There's two goals that we need to accomplish here. And that's something we navigate every day at work. And in tech specifically, healthcare tech, it's like we're focusing on features. What feature can we build on this mobile app? But like it's so small, minute, we tend to forget about how it's really impacting a member, because it's a bunch of coding and then you forget about the rest. So if you can marry those two, it's hard. I don't think we have a solution for it yet, but if you can at least speak to it, I think that's great. And then just general career advice, like, have a mentor, but also have a sponsor. There's a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. If you guys haven't spoken about that at school, that's something I learned after I graduated from Georgetown. Having a sponsor, I think, is critical. Somebody that you can go to when it's your job and you want to get promoted, and they can speak to your work, they can vouch for you, and vice versa. They're really there for you to advocate for that next level. And then negotiation, at the end of the day, you're always going to be negotiating, whether you're on the job with your coworkers or negotiating your pay. So these are just kind of skill sets that are going to help you advance in life, and constantly just think about where you want to be, not constantly, but always evaluate, what am I doing now and where do I want to go? Don't try to stay stagnant. I think complacency is a big thing, especially Neil mentioned it. A lot of people end up staying at companies for a really long time. That's big at CVS. I talk to people and they've been at CVS 20 years, sometimes in the same roles. And that's great for some people. But I know we're all Georgetown students and go-getters. And lastly, you guys are going to do great. I mean, you're Georgetown students, so you're going to be able to do anything. So keep up the good work and best of luck.
Kayla, you have the last word.
Oh, wow. So I could, everyone said, specifically Rahul, Neil, Grace, Stephanie, about just trying to upskill your knowledge on technology if possible. Typically, I think a lot of us are aware of healthcare, know like our biology, the systems, the processes, our payers. It's really important to also know your technology. Advice I was given at my most current job was to always stay close to the technology and the data, because that's where the money is outside of sales. Knowing that makes you kind of less indispensable than or less dispensable than say someone else who's spending less if you're consulting, and you probably feel it now, your customers not really want to invest as much into as big of products or projects. So really rely on them to help you figure out your focus and what you want to do. At this age or time, you don't expect to know what exact industry or sector you want to be in healthcare, if possible, but at least having an idea that you can fine tune is best. And also just learning how to properly pitch yourself. You would not imagine how many times you might meet someone while networking or using LinkedIn, and knowing how to properly articulate who you are, your vision and your why in about 1 minute is essential. At work, we always have, I think, every 6 months a workshop on giving our pitch, because our CEO is very involved, and very random, he'll show up during a call or a meeting. And it's really good to know how you can talk to him, because talking to a billionaire is not easy. So knowing your pitch is great, and it's useful in all parts of your life, honestly.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Kayla, and thank you to all our panelists